Welcome to Bootstrapped Unicorns. I'm your host, Josh Pies, and this is the show where scrappy founders, rebellious visionaries, and business misfits pull back the curtain on what it really takes to build something extraordinary from absolutely nothing. No trust fund, no fairy god investor, just grit, duct tape, caffeine, yeah, and that dream. We're talking about the wild, unfiltered ride of turning chaos into cash flow and ideas into impact. So buckle up. This is no Disney movie, but there might be some magic. Let's face it, even Elon started in a garage. So without further ado, let's get to the next episode. Welcome to Bootstrapped Unicorns, presented by C47 Digital Studios. Bootstrapped Unicorns, we're back. It's Josh Pies. Yes, I am still your host and still the hippie capitalist around here. I'm so glad you're here today because we are going to have an entrepreneurial conversation. However, it is a lesson that I needed when I got it. It's a lesson that you need now, and you're going to get it right now. But it's from somebody who is not what I would call an out-and-out entrepreneur, but he lives life in an entrepreneurial way that I have always found instructive. So I've got my good friend David Lundquist on. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But before we get into that, what I want you to do is you're going to go and subscribe to this channel. You're going to go like whatever you have to like so that you can stay into this conversation. The reason why we do Bootstrapped Unicorns is for you. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but my mission in life is to empower entrepreneurs to have healthy, thriving businesses so that you can employ good people who have great families and they too can thrive. If I can be a little bit of a one cog in the system of helping you thrive, then I've fulfilled my personal mission in building a stronger American working family. And if you've got peace on the economic front, you can focus on important things like your wife, your husband, your kids, your place in the community, your place in your church. These are the types of things that are on my mind. And my little pathway in helping you is this show and the work we do here at C47 Films. So with that in mind, I want you to really pause and go subscribe. Then you've got to come right back. And the reason why you've got to come right back is the rest of today is about living life in an intentional way. And that's what I want to talk with you, David, about today. So thanks for being here.
I am thrilled and honored to be here. You know, you and I met by divine providence. It was
totally. Tell that story.
That's a great story. I travel a lot, or used to travel a lot on business. And I had some business in Rochester, New York. And I have some status on Southwest, and I'm tall, so I try and board early and get an exit row seat. And aisle exit row is my seat. And I've learned something kind of weird over time is that the seat next to me, even on a full flight, is often the last seat to get filled. Mm-hmm. Now, I actually asked the flight attendant once, I said, do I look scary or something? Nobody wants to sit next to me. But I think it's the doorway. It's that window that people are intimidated by. They're afraid to sit in an exit row.
Yeah, and I always go for it for the leg room.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you were the last one on the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
That seat was available, and you plopped down next to me, and we began a conversation. And you were going back home to Rochester, and I was going there on work. And just part of the conversation, when are you coming back? And you said Thursday, and I said, okay, and there's one nonstop a day on Southwest.
Yep. From
Orlando to Rochester and back. I said, okay, I'll save you a seat. And I did.
Yep.
So we ended up having two
It was really cool.
flights and really got to know one another. And we bonded.
We've been friends ever since.
Exactly.
We've had many meals to break bread with each other. I actually remember towards the end of the pandemic, we showed up at a restaurant. And out of nowhere, you and your wife were there.
Yes.
And my wife is funny like this because I'll see somebody in a restaurant. She's kind of used to that. But it's usually like, hey, good to see you. Quick shake of the hand. You know, business going well, fine. But with David, you know, I walk up and I do this grand hug. And I did it wrong, which I don't do as wrong anymore. But I hugged with my left shoulder, not my right shoulder. And he's going to explain why in a second, but it's really an important distinction. And then you corrected me and we laughed about it. And my wife was just like, what is going on here? And it's like we were old college buddies or something.
Yep.
But that's how it is with you.
I try and be like that with everybody, even strangers like you.
Yeah, I know. Well,
strange people.
I was going to say I'm still strange. Yeah, it's okay. So actually, while we're here, explain the hug thing because I think that is, and we'll get to like a sliver of your business, but I almost don't care about that. Explain the hug thing.
So I don't remember where I learned it. It's been at least 25 years ago. And if you watch people hugging
Yeah.
on TV, whatever, and or in public, whatever, everybody hugs right cheek to right cheek. It's just natural.
Right. Well, my theory is we're all righties. There's so many. How many lefties are in the world?
Enough to know that you're wrong.
Oh, okay.
That it's just the way people were taught to hug, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I learned this little thing that says if you hug left cheek to left cheek, you are heart to heart.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty cool thing. So when somebody is willing to give me a hug, I just give them a little nudge and do that. And then I explain it to them.
Right.
I say, this is why I hug that. You didn't want to hug that way. And it's awkward, isn't it? It feels weird.
It always does. I have to be so intentional to force myself to hug with my left shoulder because it's not natural.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you're left cheek to left cheek, you're heart to heart, and everybody says, oh, that's so sweet. A couple people say, oh, I'm going to teach my kids that or whatever. Yeah. There's a footnote that I don't usually teach, but you figured out, is that it makes the act of the hug more intentional.
Right.
You think about it. How often do we run into people and we'll say, hi, how you doing? Fine. How you doing? Fine. And that's it. That transaction has taken place and it means absolutely nothing. So by being more intentional about the hug,
that's it.
Suddenly it goes a little deeper. You say, oh, that's pretty cool. Or, oh, I'm glad I hugged that person. I interacted with that person. So that's, you broke the second code yourself without me teaching it to you.
Well, and I'm trying to be as intentional in my business. And actually on this show, I mean, everybody knows I call myself a hippie capitalist. And the whole hippie capitalism thing is, I mean, you call it pay it forward. Some people try to call it karma, but the idea of, being as selfless as you can, pouring into others, paying more attention to them, gives the whole world a wonderful experience of you. And what goes around really does come around. And that is a biblical principle. It's the way we're wired. It's the way the world works. And so the hug thing to me almost sounds weird to talk about in an entrepreneurial setting because, capitalists aren't huggers unless they're hippie capitalists, right? And the intentionality of that left-handed hug puts me in a place to actually be more intentional with my connection with somebody. And if you're a hippie capitalist building relationships, that intentionality matters and it goes further. And so that was a big lesson for me, right? Because I mean, the first time we hung out not on a plane, I got a big hug from you and got a big correction. And it was comical. You always make it pleasant, right? You educate, which was great. But it changed how I think about ever having a meal with you. Every meal I have with you is super intentional. Mm-hmm. And I think, isn't that the way we're supposed to be, right? Yeah. Like, I think we get lost. We don't get lost in the moment. We get lost having transactions. And we can pull ourselves out of a transaction and get into a relationship building moment only by design.
And I think you hit on, a really, really important point in that. And again, like you say, I'm trying to live my life that way. Millennials particularly, or even the Gen Zs even more, are very transactional.
They can be.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've tried to say that all my business relationships particularly are not transactional. They're relational.
Yeah.
And our kids don't get it.
Yeah.
After you've established that relationship, something happens 2 weeks later, and you say, oh, that guy I met last week, he'd like to know about that. Drop him a note.
Right.
So it's all relational.
Right.
Not transactional. And that's huge.
It really is huge. So it's actually kind of funny. So we just had breakfast together so we could figure out what we're going to talk about. And you came prepared, which was fun. And I want to go over some of this with you. And the green, so you've got green flags in people, which I really like. And we talk about red flags. I introduced the Matt Rife to you earlier today, which, for those of you who don't know, and I think a lot of people know who Matt Rife is.
I didn't.
Yeah, you didn't. I knew you didn't. Comedian. He can get raunchy pretty fast. So he's definitely not for everybody. And I have to turn him off more times than I would like to admit, actually. But he does a red flags gag, right? Everything's red flags in relationships. And I like that you brought green flags. So instead of focusing on the negatives, just gravitating towards the positives is already a good thing. But this is for entrepreneurs, right? And so what I'd love to do is let's talk about the green flags. And then let's skip around and go talk about, your working career a little bit. And then let's see if we can talk about how these green flags can be found in working relationships. Because this could go Dr. Phil really fast. And we could be helping people with their marriages. And great if that helps, right? But I still want entrepreneurs to thrive in this conversation. So you brought this to me. So why don't you tell me this, what spoke to you about it? Where'd you find it?
I found it on Facebook.
Awesome.
I have no idea. As a matter of fact, actually, I did. No, not that one. It's this one that I found. The other one. It just popped up. And when I see things like that, I screen grab them right away. Well,
and it rings very true. When I read it, I was like, oh yeah, this feels right. So give us the list.
So green flags in people who are waving these green flags, they celebrate your wins. They remember small things about you. And you and I have had many instances of that, including, this morning.
Yes.
They respect your boundaries. Big one. If somebody doesn't want to hug, you still love them.
Yeah. Oh,
okay?
Yeah.
You don't make them hug. You feel energized after seeing them. That is so much fun. And you look for people like that to interact with. And you try and be a person who, and I guess that's kind of, I'll let me finish it and then I'll come back to the tie a string around all of them. They listen without being defensive. Huge. That one, especially, about politics or religion or some sensitive subject, you can listen to someone without being defensive. They allow you to be fully yourself. Just think about that one for a sec. Allow you to be fully yourself. They make you feel safe. You don't have to watch what you say. That's kind of the flip of the defensive.
You don't have to fear their reaction.
Right. You can be yourself as well. Yeah. You encourage them to be themselves, but you can be yourself as well.
Yeah.
And they support your goals. So I saw this and I said, I'm trying to be that guy. That was my conclusion when I saw this. And sometimes I don't measure up, by the way. I mean,
right. Yeah, we're human.
We fail.
Yep.
But
that's interesting, though. I like how you interpreted that you're looking at yourself. You're flipping the green flags on yourself and saying, am I this person?
Right.
Because the first time I looked at it, I was like, oh, okay, so this is an interesting rubric to evaluate other people and where I'm around them. But you spent time focusing on who you are for the world first.
Yes.
And I find, so that's very hippie capitalist of you. Right.
I'll take it.
Yeah. So, and that's a good, I'm a little embarrassed because the first time I looked at that, I was like, okay, how do I evaluate who I curate around
who's measuring up to be a green flag person in your life?
Correct. Yeah. Because if you read like the works of Cloud and Townsend, they did the Boundaries Guys and Safe People and all of that. Really good texts because there's a lot of people trying to sort out, the narcissists and the sociopaths in their world and how to either live with them or live without them. And it's an extremely instructive set of texts. And so this is an interesting reverse on what they do because they're helping you identify the negatives and rescue yourself from the negatives. But this helps you in a good way gravitate towards the positives. But in true David fashion, you went, who am I? And I think that's really interesting because as an entrepreneur, what would it look like if you worked more on yourself so that you could attract the right relationships to you?
Being a better you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you can't be in a healthy relationship unless you have a healthy self.
Right.
That's another one of my core beliefs is, you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to have a healthy self. If you don't, you can't. And back to your original point about you're trying to help people have richer lives to be able and space to be better thems.
Yeah.
You're teaching that point.
Yeah, that makes a heck of a lot of sense. So I'm gonna put a pin in this and we're gonna come back to it.
Okay.
right now it kind of sounds like you're the local pastor. And so we met when you were on a business trip, and you have been a facilitator. I think consultant is a good term.
It is,
for a very long time in a pretty high tech space.
Yes, sir.
What do you do?
I'm a data extractor. I work for a small, not so small anymore.
I know there's like 300 employees.
Yeah, but it's a real company. And when I started it, it was tiny 20 years ago when I started with them. After retiring after a full-time career in aerospace. And it's a data analytics company in Addison, Texas. And my role with them has evolved to be their lead facilitator, and I call that a data extractor. The company pays me to stick a vacuum cleaner on people's heads and suck their brains out.
All right.
And hopefully have them smile while I'm doing it and not be a painful experience.
This is fascinating to me because you've never described it that way. What does this actually mean?
What it actually means, particularly the little segment of aerospace and defense that I'm working in right now, is in competitive assessment. When a company is getting ready to bid on a defense opportunity, they will hire us to come in and say, who are our competitors and what are they likely to be doing with respect to this particular engagement? So we bring in subject matter experts who know something about the competitive company. We sometimes bring in experts on the project itself. And what I love about it is, and I've been doing it now, this specific thing for about 12 years, is that every time the phone rings, it's something new. Last fall, I helped a company who was bidding on putting new engines on the B-52.
Wow.
Which is ancient, an ancient machine.
We're talking what, 40s, 50s, and 60s, right?
Yeah, 50s, I think, is when it first started flying. Okay. 70-year-old airplane.
And we're going to keep flying those things.
They're going to keep flying them. And I learned in the process of doing this particular one that the Air Force has just awarded a contract for a brand new bomber to Northrop Grumman, the B-21. And in between the B-52 and the B-21, they had a B-1 and a B-2, which you may have heard about. Sure. The B-2 is the stealth thing, the flying wing. B-1 looks kind of like a Concorde sort of airplane.
The B-1B.
They're going to retire both of those, keep the B-52, and have a...
Really? Yes. So my father-in-law was the chief navigator on the B-1B. Okay. And so my family knows an odd amount about that. And we knew it was possibly on the chopping block, but it's gone away. No kidding. It's a gorgeous plane. Out of
the, I don't know how many B-52s they built. There's less than 100 still flying, but they're going to keep them flying.
Fascinating.
So that was last fall. And then in January, I did an engagement with the Army. I didn't know this. The Army contracts has a thing called, Prototype Integration Facility in Huntsville, where they can bring like a helicopter in and put some new kit on it real fast to try it out. And they're competing that contract. So that was that one. The one I'm doing next week is for air combat maneuvering instrumentation, which sounds a whole mouthful.
Wow.
It's a pod that they put on a fighter. So when they do training and simulate dogfights, they know where that airplane is. They know where the other airplanes is. They know where the simulated bad guys are. They can say, if I fired a missile now, I would win this dogfight kind of thing. It's called air combat maneuvering instrumentation. So every time it's different, but the process is the same, is taking a deep dive into the competitors and helping our clients have a better understanding of what they're up against.
It's fascinating that you're working in the defense world and that you're the person you are. Well, it really, I understand how it aligns because I know you so well, but it's, if I were to just say, hey, that's jumbo shrimp, here's an oxymoron. You've got a very happy person who supports everyone, who looks for green flags in himself first, and then helps other people grow their green flags. And you work in the defense world. How does that work?
It's a great question. And Years ago, I thought I'd broken my toe, and I went into an urgent care thing. And while this was many years ago, they were waiting for the X-rays to develop. Okay,
oh my,
now that's
that ages this
now,
story.
right? Okay,
yes.
ages the story. So we're just talking, and I told him, I worked for then Martin Marietta.
Okay.
And he said, "Well, how can you work for a company that makes things that kill people?" And my answer then was very interesting. About the time I was born, the U.S. government made a decision to change the name of one of their cabinet departments from the Department of War to the Department of Defense. The cornerstone on the Pentagon still says Department of War.
Oh, does it really?
It does. And so I said, that's why I do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I came up with a much better answer. And I've been in social environments before where they ask the question you sort of just
how
asked.
dare you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've come up with a much better answer.
What's your answer?
I do it to protect the rights of people like you to ask me questions like that.
Ooh, I like that.
Isn't that neat?
Yeah.
It shuts them down pretty fast, too.
Oh, yeah.
Way.
Well, and I don't know. I've shown you years ago that film that we did called I Fought for You.
Yeah.
Right. So when you flip it on somebody else and you make it about them, like I selflessly did this for you, that suddenly reframes the entire conversation. And it can either opens up gratitude or it shuts mouths, because it's very hard to fight with otherwise.
So now I just take the approach, and before I go into any business engagement, I say, God, help me to be a blessing to my coworkers and my clients. Yeah. Full stop.
Yeah, I love that. And so tell me a little bit more about facilitation, because I think there is maybe a dotted line to kind of the way you live life with being a connector, being the people person that you are, that I think dots over to what is a really healthy entrepreneurial tack.
So what do you think is the most important skill for a facilitator?
I know you really well here, so I'm going to say listening.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Absolutely
is.
And I've taught listening to my coworkers because you'll be much better at getting information. It's not just reading the questions.
Yeah.
Okay. You got questions you want answered. You initiate. You want it to be a conversation, not an interrogation.
Okay.
Huge.
Yep.
Huge. You got information that you need. Okay, and you got it down in front of you. But you don't ask question number one and fill in the blank. You say, hey, what do you know about this company? What matters to you about this? Why is this important to you? And you're going to get all your questions answered.
Right.
But you're not just asking questions and having an interrogation.
Yeah.
So that's
how much does that open up surprises? Because I'll bet there's so much that's unpredictable.
Absolutely. And something I don't tell everybody, and I don't know whether I've ever told you this or not, but the thing that equipped me more than anything else to do what I do today is when I was 12 years old, I did magic.
Really?
And one of the reasons I don't tell people that is because then they expect me to do a magic trick.
Where's your cards?
Right, exactly, or a coin or whatever. And I don't.
Yeah.
But what it taught me is if you're up on a stage and a trick goes bad, you can't run off the stage in tears.
Right.
You have to deal with that surprise,
right.
to your point. So you just have to be ready. The other to expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's where the value is.
I was wondering if there's opportunities in the unexpected. Yeah.
No question. Every rabbit hole doesn't have a rabbit in the end of it, but sometimes there's a lump of gold down there.
Right.
So the biggest challenge and what 50 years of defense acquisition experience has brought to what I do is knowing how long to let that go before you
bring it back. That's interesting.
And that's art.
Okay. So is there any science in that art? How have you figured out?
Not really.
No. Okay.
There's a sense.
Yeah.
And one tool that many facilitators use, and I use a lot, is a parking lot.
Okay.
have a whiteboard or a sticky note, something up on the wall and say, that's a great point. We got to get on with this. I'll put it over here and we'll come back to it later. And then do, by the way.
Do or acknowledge that you've run out of time and that these had value or something, but you can't ignore it.
So the parking lot's a great tool for a facilitator.
That's interesting. So I wonder how much of the entrepreneurial building of relationships is a hybrid of some of this facilitation mindset and some of this hippie capitalist green flag existence. Because you do have to facilitate to a degree in order to find more than just, mutual interests, but some reason to do business together. So I think there's an element of facilitation that happens in that relationship build.
Selling, particularly sales, is you can't. And my father was a salesman.
Mm-hmm. What did he sell?
He started selling red meat and then processed meat and then soap and then glue.
Put them together. What do you got? A mistake.
Put them together. What have you got? A horse.
Oh,
all of those products.
Okay, I hadn't thought about that. Good point.
Absolutely.
But moving on, he sold all those things, and
but the most he knew the names of the secretary's kids of his clients. He taught me that you treat the CEO and the janitor with exactly the same level of dignity and respect.
That's what you and your wife did at that restaurant with the busboy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You treat everybody that you encounter with the same level of dignity and respect.
What does that achieve? I understand the gift it can be to the person who might never get respect. Like I loved your story this morning about the busboy. Quickly, give me the short version of that one.
Well, one of the things I've tried to do in middle age is to make invisible people visible. Because there are so many people, a cashier, a housekeeper in a hotel, a busboy in a restaurant, who are viewed by transactional people as objects.
Yeah.
They run the cash register. It's a machine thing. But if they're wearing a name tag and you use their name, okay. So we've started to, if there is a busboy who his only job is to clear tables in a restaurant, he's the most invisible person on the planet. Nobody sees him. He doesn't interact with the guests until they're gone. So you see him and he's doing a job, he or she, and you say, that's an important job. So you ask their name, you call them over to the table, you slip them a couple of bucks, and you say, thank you for what you do. It's real simple.
Yeah.
But it's game changing.
Yeah. So that game changer for that person is pretty outstanding. In return, like your father, when he would know the secretary's name, secretary's kid's name, he would have this depth of understanding of them, which shows that he cares. What do you get in return as a salesperson for being that aware of the invisible people?
It's easy. If you need to see the procurement, the buyer, you say, "Hey, Mary, how you doing today? Your kid's broken arm heal?" Says, "Oh, by the way, I need to come in next week and see Mr. Thomas."
Done.
Yeah. The whole thing is relational.
It's funny. You're describing, there's a great book called Mr. Schmooze. Have you ever read this? Best way. So a friend of mine, Dan Grebe, he's a great big time realtor here in Central Florida. Hi, Dan. He recommended I listen to the book. He goes, you could read it, but he goes, the reading of it for the 3 hours that you would have to read to this short book. He goes, the audiobook is so good. He was right. And he talks about a salesperson who holds court. He goes into a restaurant and he knows the hostess. He knows every bartender. He's been into the back room. He's met the dishwasher. He goes and he's got his regular table.
I love it.
He has people come to him, and which this blew my mind. I love it. The first person he has coffee with in the morning is strategically designed to run into the next meeting who's going to come in and sit down. He wants those people to meet and interact because he's going to introduce them. Through the process, he's got lists of this person's kid just hit a home run in a baseball game. Send them a bag of peanuts from, their favorite baseball stadium with a note, and he sends all that to his assistant and has that flow through. You want people to be seen?
Yeah.
Wow. And so you could have written Mr. Schmooze, right? You really could have. So, and this goes back to the whole green flag thing, because this character in Mr. Schmooze, he fit all the green flags himself, and he's building understanding in other people of what it means to be a green flag. He's kind of paying it forward, which I find really interesting in this moment. Like I'm just realizing this now. So your dad was a salesperson. You saw that behavior. Is this where you got the awareness of kind of how to be in this world? How did you figure this out?
I think so. Yeah. To be others centric is another way of putting it.
Yeah.
There's an old hymn called Others that my parents had, a little frame on their bedroom wall. It says, "Others, let me like others be, help me to be like others so I can be like thee," or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was to be others, my wife is so good at it, by the way, and this may never see the light of day, that sometimes she's so other-centric that others prioritize over me, and I get a little annoyed by it. But it's okay.
Yeah, I get it.
I thought you would.
Yeah, I do get it. There's such great value into pouring into others, and it's, I don't know, sometimes it's just the feeling. Like that pay off enough or is enough, but then knowing that what goes around really does come around, it's actually kind of a surprise too, right? It's like, I don't know how any of the good stuff that I might put into this world is going to pay off.
No.
So many of the things have no connection to a rational business plan. Yet when the world has become aware of who you are for good reasons, you get rewarded. People will ask for, your help and be willing to pay for it at the right moment. So it's an interesting construct.
But I think an important part of that is living your life that way. You have to not be concerned about outcomes. I think that's really important. You're not doing it for the future benefit necessarily.
Yeah. How do you strike that with profit though? Because a business has to make money. And where is the balance? How do we find the balance?
That's a hard one.
It is.
It's a really hard one. And I've never really worried about it myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm not technically an entrepreneur in terms of building a business like you and I have talked about.
Yeah.
But I'm entrepreneurial in terms of relationships and connecting. You talked about connecting people.
Well, and that's the big challenge. I mean, if you can figure out how to be a connector, because I generally am. And it's always roundabout and frequently distant, but it does pay off. And I see it time and again.
Absolutely.
So how do you figure that out?
I don't think you do.
I think that's a fair answer.
I don't think you do figure it out. I think you every day you go down that path and you say, oh, geez, that thing I saw last week, this would have value to this person over here, and you share it.
Yeah.
Or that person would have value to that person over there, and you introduce them. I've done that with you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Specifically. And I kind of do it almost unconsciously.
Right.
I don't think you figure it out. I think it just happens because you're consistent in the way you live your life.
And that makes sense. And there's almost permission in this conversation to have maybe somewhat of a duplicitous life. And not that I believe being, hot and cold doesn't work. And, I get that in so many ways. But if as a person, you live life as a connector, and as an entrepreneur, you still have the discipline to say, this is my business plan. This is what I give into this world. And I do have to find opportunities and sell my wares, but I can be this giver at the same time. I think that giver nature, that connector nature, that person who finds green flags and fosters green flags, and I think it's more importantly, fosters green flags, it will come back to the business over time. Right. So, and so frequently I'll have a sales call, and that sales call will start with, we have to do business together. And then I realize that I'm also building a relationship that will have much deeper meaning. And so our clients here at C47 Miller, you probably see this pretty often. I don't know if you observe it or not, sir. And everybody off camera is Miller. I don't think he's ever going to enjoy coming on camera. Maybe I should interview you sometime. Is that a thing, Miller? Maybe. I got a maybe, everybody.
I heard it.
I took that as a yes.
You have a witness.
Yeah, we have a witness. But what'll happen is I'll take a sales call with somebody, and then in no time, I'm also sending them to my chiropractor because he's the best I know. And I'm connecting them with my mortgage rep because he is the most caring person in that world that I know. And I'm suggesting they attend the, Easter cantata church because it's really charming with all the little kids in it. And so now I've got all these personal invites that happen, yet I'm still asking them for their business.
Right.
They're
not exclusive. I totally agree with you. Yes. Yeah. And I kind of object to you using the word duplicitous because I don't think it is. I think it's consistent. Both things can be true at the same time.
Yes.
They're not exclusive.
Well, and I think that's the struggle with how we in society, and I'm the hippie capitalist, and I openly just struggled with it, the profit motive and the seedy side of the cartoon version of profit motive is so conflated that I mistakenly had this duplicitous thing in order to try to bring up the fact that you're right. You said it better. It's they run concurrent. They coexist. They actually commingle.
Right.
If done right. That whole Snidely Whiplash, like I'm going to charge them for something. Yeah. Like it's not actually how it is.
Right.
Yeah. Not when done right. Yeah.
That's what I think.
So another thing you prepared for me today, I had never heard, but so I've studied entrepreneurship almost my whole life. Did you know I got my MBA in entrepreneurship?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, I've spent some time on this topic, and I've never seen the thing about what country was it that actually
Prussian Empire?
The Prussian Empire. So what is the etymology of entrepreneur?
I thought it was fascinating as well. And I looked it up because without Josh, I would not see myself as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, you're so entrepreneurial, though.
But I really am.
Yeah.
But I'm entrepreneurial in my product is relationships, and I'm nurturing them.
It's an expansion of the term for certain.
It is. But this I thought was kind of interesting. Entrepreneur has been used in English to refer to a kind of businessman since at least the middle of the 18th century.
Wow.
When it appeared in a translation of the King of Prussia's instructions for his generals. Quote, if the country happens not to abound in forage, you must agree with some entrepreneur for the quantity required. You got to negotiate, with somebody who has what you need if the forage is not out there.
And the forage, it sounds like he's talking about my generals are about to take over a country or at least pass through a country. And if this is a poor country that cannot find a way to sustain us, we have to go do business with business people in order to have us survive. That's what I'm taking those instructions
I think
to
so.
mean.
Yeah. But then it goes on to say, in terms of the etymology of the term, during the 19th century, it was also used of a go-between or person who undertakes any kind of activity as opposed to just a business. And that's where it fits for me.
Yeah.
Right? A go-between, somebody who is making things happen around them, not necessarily business.
Literally, that's a facilitator.
Absolutely. Yes.
Facilitation is almost one and the same, the 19th century version of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, my stories about my family. So some of this could be colored a little bit weird, but my father would talk about arbitrage a lot.
Yeah.
And the simple concept of buy low, sell high, you're the man in the middle. And that is the go-between concept. And isn't it, really at a functional standpoint, everything in entrepreneurship and business is arbitrage. Go to Trader Joe's, you pick up a bag of pasta. Somebody made it for a low and you're buying it from Trader Joe's who bought it reasonably low. And then so that somebody who made it sold it higher to Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's will then be a go-between and sell it higher again, when you can do one of two things: take it to a restaurant, make it and sell it higher, or take it home and eat it.
Or look at the people at Costco who are buying things to stock their convenience store.
Right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So they're buying low at Costco and selling high at the corner store because they are literally a convenience store.
Right.
They are your convenient go-between. So you didn't have to go to the superstore and buy the 800-pound bag of flour. Right. Yeah. So, and that's, our business, you wouldn't think of us as arbitrage, but we're a time arbitrage.
Yes.
Everybody that we serve in video podcasting could give up their main line of business, learn how to work with cameras, be on camera, edit video, access these fascinatingly free platforms like YouTube, and do the work that we do. Smart people can do smart things. And there's a lot of smart people out there who could do that. But what's not smart is giving up your main line of business where you make all of your money in favor of doing something that's basically an entirely new business plan. So we are the time freedom in order to unlock that for people. So all we do is we are, at the simplest, very talented time arbitrage.
Right. So you're just talking about the commodity of time and the value of time. I have a book on hold at the library. It's apparently very popular because I've been on the list for a long time, but I saw a story about it. It's called Siren Call. It's the title of the book. It makes the point that the most valuable commodity in the 21st century, especially in the West, is our attention.
Oh, absolutely.
It is about all of the things that are trying to buy our eyeballs for time. The scrolling, the TikTok, all of this.
This darn Apple Watch has gone off 4 times since we're here. I forgot to silence it. And so it wants me to take my time from you. Right. It's literally calling me
the most important commodity
I'm going to silence it.
Is our attention.
Yeah.
Our eyeballs.
Yeah.
That's scary.
It's scary, but at the same time, then you take a facilitator who is willing to do life with people and spend time with them. How much more valuable is it to give a left-handed hug and actually be around somebody, listen to them well, and then choose to do something of value with what you heard? That's a very expensive gift. Through the lens of that, if attention is the most precious commodity, then paying attention, real attention, not just time, but actual intentional intention. Boy, is that word used a lot in the last 2 sentences. That is a fascinating gift, but it's also leverage. Not in a negative way.
No, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, physics is funny because my kids aren't in it yet, right? But I was explaining to Natalie, my middle child, what physics was because she heard that someday she'd have to take it. And she thought it was like a gym class because it was physical, right? And then, no, that's not quite it, right? So, I'm sliding something down a dinner plate, right? And you got a smooth surface and sliding. And we're like, well, there was still friction there, right? And I was talking about friction and trying to explain that. And then I explained fulcrums. I was like, teeter-totters. Let's talk about teeter-totters. We've seen them, right? They're the fulcrum point. And if I move the teeter-totter, it either gets harder or easier depending on where the fulcrum point is. I said, that's why we have physics. That's why we study it. But it's interesting with time because if we're intentional, we can move the fulcrum point.
But time, it's a fleeting commodity. First of all, it's gone. It's here and gone. But the other thing is, and really, I'm not quite sure how to phrase what I'm about to say, but if you are willing to give, to invest your time in another person, in a relationship, and you got to be careful, say, hey, have you got a minute? And be serious about that. But then focus the person stocking the shelf at Trader Joe's And I can just tell by the way she's putting the burritos on the shelf that she's not having a good day.
Yeah.
And I'll stop and I say, "Hey, Rachel, how you doing?"
I love that you know everybody's name at Trader Joe's.
That matters too.
I know.
Okay, matters a lot. How are you doing? You doing all right? You having a good day? I had somebody call me from a doctor's office trying to verify a prescription or something, and before the conversation was over, she was laughing.
Good.
And I said, "My work here's done."
Yeah, that's right.
I said it out loud.
Yeah.
I said, "You're laughing. My work here's done."
Because it is.
Because it is.
Yeah. And you know, entrepreneur who's watching this, somebody's listening going, "Why am I listening to this?" And then somebody else is listening going, "I'm really glad I'm listening to this." So if you're in the "why am I listening to this" side of things, go back and listen to how we just talked about investment of time. Because if attention is the greatest asset in our world at this point and probably going forward, really.
I think so.
And every time spent, think about that word. You're spending time. It is a fleeting commodity. This is all language of value. We talk about commodities, spending, investing, all in relation to time.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, I was listening to something a couple of years ago, and they were like, think about TV. Television has programming that you're supposed to consume. That's frightening terminology.
It is.
That's frightening terminology. So then now flip the terminology and actually listen to it. You're spending time, which is a commodity, and it is a choice as to whether you waste the commodity of time or you consider it an investment.
Yeah.
And know what you're investing in. Your time is more valuable than you knew. And through the lens of relationship building and how you sell to others and how you do life, suddenly you've got an entire stock market of time investment opportunities. What are you going to do with that? I kind of want to leave that there. I kind of want to hang it there.
Yeah.
That if it's not unsettling, it's unsettling to me as I listen to it, as positive as that is, but it makes me go, ooh, how are my investments doing?
I love it.
Yeah. So we're leaving it there, I think. David, are you cool with that?
I'm very cool with that. And I am honored to have invested this time with you.
Same here. Mutual investment. I like that.
Amen.
So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, I want you to continue investing some time in yourself by listening to this show. And it's an honor. And I've said this many episodes. It is always an honor and a privilege to have your attention. I do not take it for granted. We have the Facebook group, which is really quiet right now. And it's okay because I've been a little quiet. I've been a little distracted with a lot of things going on. But I'm going to try to be a little bit more intentional about diving back into the Bootstrapped Unicorns group in Facebook. So if you haven't joined it, please do. And we're looking for people who are entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs to never sell in the group. You're there to learn from each other or help each other, bring up business problems, business ideas, challenge some norms, whatever. But it is all about iron sharpening iron. Are you in that group?
Yes.
Okay, you should be. So I want to make sure you are.
You invited me, and I'm not sure why, but now I understand.
Because this is how I see it.
Exactly.
Yes. So there you go. But anyhow, so you've got to spend a little time on yourself and be around people so you can sharpen yourself. So I'm inviting you into that group. But for now, I always end this episode with any episode with get back to work. But I want you to get back to work ever so more intentionally today, because today you will have a far greater awareness about spending time and investing time. So with that, get very intentionally back to work.